Julie here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Venus hour, applying to be Mercury night. And Venus is 18 degrees Virgo. Mercury is 26 degrees Libra, separating from opposition to Chiron and Aries. Ascendant is ruled by Mars, midheaven by Saturn, and the moon is leaving from out. Now, here is the thing. First of all, the overall energy reading for today is that there was an attempt to cross a certain boundary, and as usual, it backfired. And so there are a lot of stressed up energies. Now, here's the deal on the mundane level. When it comes to the Israel-Palestine issue, there's basically a deal to return the kidnapped people. There's a bit of a strategic mess that the IDF is in. I mean, I know that's the tautology, but but in terms of the battlefield, and here is the thing. I talked about the fact that I see a certain attempt to consolidate or to negotiate, and some people are going to be disincluded from the discourse, and it's going to be like for the best of, like it's thought to be for the best of it all, but it's actually not. And here's the thing. It's supposed to be, it's Shabbat in Israel, and basically a secular leader is warning, Lapid is warning, that when the Shabbat is leaving, we will hear a lot of threats from Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and we will not let them corrupt the deal. Now, here's the thing. I don't know what do this Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have to say, but one thing I know, that when the war is over, Benjamin Netanyahu has a couple of things to tend to juristically. The entire Tweede Kamer and alumni finds that so relatable that it's about to call orange. Hope not. Um, that's my way of coping with that. Anyway, so I wonder what will those Ben-Gvir and Smotrich have to say. Because astrologically speaking, I saw a situation where Mercury is opposing Chiron in Aries. Mercury is around Spica, so there are attempts to do some sort of negotiations. There's some sort of toxic diplomacy going on, probably behind the scenes. But I also predicted that the people that are disincluded from the conversation hold a certain key that is missing from the negotiation table and is actually necessary, even though bringing them to the negotiation table will create a complete, utter, and total chaos. Now, those people being Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, I'm like, this is going to so, and here's the thing, so many people in Israel beneath the poverty line and cannot afford buying popcorn. Okay, there are some people that try to prevent the war/genocide from stopping, and they're trying to pressure Netanyahu. Like, one doesn't have to pressure Netanyahu. He does know how the people that would okay. As a person attending to political assassination prevention and the role of targeted individuals in that, no point of trying to harm people's genitalia. Thank you very much. I have no idea. I mean, those death cults are weird. But the thing is that um, that project is really being risky because there are many targeted individuals and only one prime minister. So Benjamin Netanyahu, I guess, is mutually pressured to both stop the war and not stop the war. And I know. Doing dark magic is not going to solve the issue. Dark magic is how the issue started with the children, remember? So we're not doing dark magic. We're trying to be ritual abuse survivors, not perpetuators. Anyway, no, but listen to this. I don't know who's Sengauker. Oh, the mother of one of the kidnapped people. Um, okay. She said that she talking about Banker and Smotrich, and they say that they must like mitigate those to bring back the kidnapped people, and talked about the people that trade the trafficked, the kidnapped people. Those that trade the kidnapped people prefer mansions in Gaza over saving lives. Some of them want a Nobel Prize. But anyway, and Trump said only the people on the barricades will return the kidnapped people. Now this is I am so glad that we have this on record. Anybody that wants to do a print out of that, translate that into simple English and broadcast it on the Pentagon and the White House. Because there are a lot of missing people in United States. Somebody was trying to explode the entrance to Jerusalem. Four of 10 Jews believe that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, in United States. Otherwise, they would abolish the Epstein thingy. I mean, but then what is it? What define define the entity called Israel with all the lobbying and weird things? I don't know what's anymore. Now that the protests to end the war in Gaza are coming to okay, Ukraine. Okay, now I have to sing not to mute. Now that the war in Gaza is coming to hopefully an end, Congo. Is there a thing where in Facebook when people used to change their profiles on social media for the like the infrastructure for the global intifada is already there. Now just like Congo. They have people all around the world replace the watermelon flag with something in favor of Congo. Now Congo is a bit more challenging because it's a civil war. I know my list of last searched items is looking funny. Not on news. people feeling sorry for traveling the world with a caravan. Um, not buying that. Anything interesting in our toes? Every other day Putin intentionally does something. We're in Denmark. Okay. Everything, everything Putin does something with a drone that's supposed to trigger like an Article 5 or something. I'll keep that job telepathic. Um, NATO threatens cooperation with the private sector to make our societies. Okay, that's 1 day, 2 day, 1 day, 14 hours, 33 hours. NATO turns Ukraine's Delta to command 100 plus drones in landmark military. Hungary clings to Russian oil and gas as EU and NATO push to cut supplies. Hungary. Why no solar energy? Let's do Hungary's natal chart for a change. It's from 1873. This is so slow. There's national chart in astro.com from 1989. That's the freedom from the Soviet Union, which I think is the more relevant one. Can we get a chart? Can we get a chart? I want to see the chart, thank you. I want to analyze it myself, not just read other folks' stuff. Magha Nakshatra Moon, I think, or the Nakshatra or before that. Jupiter return, Jupiter Chiron, it's 89. They have Saturn maturation. Ascendant 7 degrees Capricorn, conjoining Saturn and Uranus and Neptune. Okay. Holding the timestamp of. Oh, this is a. Oh, ouch. Hi. Okay. Um, this is a timestamp of Neptune, Uranus, Saturn opposing Chiron, Jupiter. And who is sent to mitigate I do not wish upon you to have Uranus opposing your Chiron. Uranus is now conjunct in my Chiron, and I need to remind myself that. Ouch. Wait, this is not an easy chart. And that is with the relationships with the nations. Moon in Leo is in a good placement. But in the 8th house, Lama, why? The sun, the sun is 0 degrees Scorpio. the, the about to have a solar return when the sun of Hungary right now is suffering, but it's also suffering for the people. And here is why the oil infrastructure is basically kind of a negotiation. It's like they managed to fund having their own leadership and jurisdiction and maybe diplomacy army through something to do with that oil infrastructure. Now the oil is Russian, but the infrastructure, as we know, is very likely Rockefeller. Is it? Isn't it? I mean, I don't know. I know in Estonia there is an issue with technique that they used. And I guess that deal with Rockefeller managed to get them a sovereign country, but the oil is still Russian. I think that was the negotiation. It was a fiscal negotiation that they would still participate in contributing to the Russian economy, and they got their sovereignty on that basis. You see, I saw this Chiron, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and even my mind went like a little bit of a goo. It's kind of like, ooh, ouchie. Um, so they haven't fiscally separated from their problems, but they did manage to have some sort of sovereignty with the people here. Probably there are a lot of Russian people there. I don't know the population of Hungary, but it looks like there are a lot of Russian folks there. They separated from the Soviet Union, and the 7th house, which would be the ally and enemy, which is the Soviet Union, is ruled by the moon, which is the people. And the people of the allies and enemy are providing for this 8th house thing, are like a hidden resource, but to do with the leaders, very complicated. Rahu in Aquarius, last decan of Aquarius. Which means they have Moon Ketu. Moon Ketu. Okay, this is not an easy chart. This is going to be a very big problem for NATO. It's because it's looking like it's Ukraine separated their manufacturing. They have been manufacturing the batteries. They have some rare earth minerals, and they have been manufacturing the batteries for the Geely in China and the wheat. So they were able to fiscally separate from Russia, but not territorially. Hungary was able to territorially separate from Russia, but only territorially. And that's a big deal for NATO. it seems that the leaders wanted to, it looks like I remember what the times where they said that the Vatican, the Pope at the Vatican declared himself imprisoned in the Vatican. It looks like some, I don't know how was the dissolution of Hungary from Russia, but or USSR, but it looks something along that line. Let's take a look at the history of this country. Hungary. The dissolution. Okay, let's 9.6 million population, kind of like Israel, like about that size of a country in terms of population, but it's a bigger territorial country. Okay, but this is going to be, this is a big problem because when, and it's not for nothing, people are urging Hungary to give up the oil trade with Russia, but the entire sovereignty of the country is lying on that. This is problem. But there's something interesting about NATO in that sense because they are okay. Let's put on NATO's chart and NATO natal chart because I'm kind of mm, yeah, whatever. What I feel that NATO is separating from Rockefeller. NATO is separating from Rockefeller. Now I'm trying to see that in the chart. They have Pluto in the 12th house in Leo. Virgo ascendant. Saturn in the 12th house in Leo. Neptune in Libra, probably going through transit in Aries. Aquarius being the 6th house. Pluto in the 6th house. Pluto in the 6th house means an global oil company being an enemy, open enemy. This is not the first time that Europe is trying to say bye-bye to the RNRs, but they will have to address House of Orange. Um, Putin provides the oil, but the infrastructure, I think, is still Rockefeller. Putin curated the infrastructure, but was that the deal with... Let's see. Foundation and Russia. Rich connections between Rockefeller and Russia in 1919 to 1928. Putin-Rockefeller encounter. Rockefeller condemns invasion to Ukraine 2022. Rockefeller Soviet access. The Russian Communist Revolution posed a major threat to the world oil monopoly and to the worldwide expansion of the rapid growing Rockefeller empire. That's interesting, because I think that Hungary serves a little bit of a juncture point here. Okay. So the communists maintained the oil. And the British oil, Dutch Shell group was controlling the oil in in Persia and the Caucasus. Since the turn of the century, the rivalry meant incessant strife. Then Russian Revolution was financed by Rockefeller's banker Kunlo, an eye to the oil of the Caucasus and adjacent lands. And the most intense activities has centered around the Baku oil fields. Mexican Revolution, Mexican War, to oust the Royal Dutch and other rivals from Mexico. This is how the Dutch began to rejuvenate energy. They're just going to innovate elsewhere. The Saudi Arabia oil fields had been wrested from British control. New communist Russia offered the opportunity to oust British Royal Dutch Shell oak from Caucasus, Persia, and the rest of the Near East and India. And the question was, would the communists be more dangerous to deal with than the British? And they played the British against the communists and attempted to do that in 1918. The British attempted to basically get control over this oil. Okay. And British moved to take over the oil fields towards the end of towards the Great War. The British labor movement, which the Rockefeller had fostered, opposed further military occupation of Caucasus and forced withdrawal of the troops. Then the Rockefeller-dominated U.S. State Department that refused to recognize them and blocked the turning over of the Caucasus oil fields to the Royal Dutch and Shell. So just think about the Great War. Now stop thinking, because John D. Rockefeller did not want thinking people. To establish semblance of legal title to the Caucasian fields, the Rockefeller Standard Oil Group in 1920 brought a half interest in Noble and Co.'s production in Baku. You see, the fact that I am reading those particular things, albeit being an academic, is already showing how, with the spirit of the times, as women had to self-care, they began to look they began to look at these things. Because while I was definitely not the woman that stays in the kitchen, unless there's sushi in the making by somebody who helps me make sushi, but but I can definitely assist in the military effort to eat sushi. but I was academic, but I was pretty much escaping everything, even within the departments of politics. I was pretty much escaping the world, and then having, but after the Me Too and the trying to have apartments and so on, seeing that the entire world is dumbfuckery, and trying to see, okay, how do I actually tend to my business and so on, then I end up reading those things. And talking about stuff that many in the field are trying to trade and deal with, all kinds of dark occult things that get their spouses to want a divorce. um, and watch me. Who is he? Who is he cheating on me with? Some suicidal-looking girl that actually talks about the Rockefellers. That is more hormonal spike than porn. And she's doing astrology. Okay. 1920, Rockefeller bought half interest in Noble and Co.'s production in Baku. Not the Nobel Prize, the Noble Energy. I call it Land Leviathan. um, this amounted to approximately 40% of the yield of the field. The title were a mere mirage unless the Bolsheviks could be forced to restore to the owners their properties that had been expropriated or nationalized in 1918. Rockefeller interest also acquired from the Persian government a concession to the North Persian oil I told you that Israel and Iran are not separate, and never mind. In terms of Rockefeller, they aren't. They're just fighting each other while he drains the oil and the profits. Um, um, okay, in conflict with British interests and Soviet treaty claims, a concession has been granted to Russian interests during the Tsarist regime, sold to them on May 8, 1920, to the Anglo-Persian Co., the majority of stockholder of which is the British government. Both the Russian and the British government objected strenuously to the North Persian concessions to the Rockefellers' interests. Rockefeller's empire game had been to play the British Royal Dutch interests against the communists, nothing relevant to today, until they could dispose of the first and one and only, and then one and then the other. And this is the thing, when Netherlands tried to, how should I say that, sovereign up from the Rockefellers, the scrutiny and the scandals began to one after the other amount to a threat of code orange. Theirs is a chess game with mankind and the wealth of nations as pawns. The prize that they cherish more highly than the blood and the wealth of others is oil and world domination. Now here's the thing, people are moving to solar energy. Yeah, that's another thing I talked about in 2015 on Facebook. And well, coming to rehabilitate from being disabled at work. She's a 10 but neurodivergent. Oh, that's not terrible. I mean, she talks about the Rockefellers. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a sensitive having to move to solar energy. Well, can you tell her to come that she's gonna do astrology again? And delineate the rituals that people do to target individuals and get them homeless. Or get them in extortion cults. I mean, yeah. um, the Rockefeller dictated State Department policy in regards to Russia at Genoa was aimed at compelling the restoration of the nationalized oil fields. They sought to put Russia into the position where she would be forced to make restitution, while at the same time blocking the granting of concession to their competitors. It can be said in praise of that policy that it had the semblance of being in favor of the US, even though it did serve the Rockefeller Standard Oil interest more particularly, or exclusively. The Royal Dutch Oil Co., this is where the House of Orange comes into play, had already begun negotiations with Russia for a monopolistic oil concession, which Standard Oil and Co., that would be marketed as peace in Ukraine, and was able to block with the aid of its handmaiden. You see, it all began from me being targeted in. I mean, yes, I wrote something about moving to solar. Handmaiden, the US State Department. At the Hague Conference in June 1922, The same tactics were successfully repeated. In the following September, a blockade of Russian oil was organized under the auspices of the Standard Oil Co. and others through the groupement International des Sociétés Nefti, Nef, Societies of Neft in Russia. Neft is oil. Behind this sham front that was designed to hamstring competitors, the Royal Dutch and Shell interests purchased 70,000 tons of oil from Russia, and Dodge, an official of the Standard Oil and Co., went to Moscow to seek concessions. Now here's the thing with the Rockefeller, they didn't want thinking people. But eventually, anyway, two things happened that served to bring about a change in front among the oil companies. Russia began exporting oil, 330,000 tons in 1922, and it began to quadruple in 1924, though its NAFTA syndicate. Syndicates that looks like something from the X-Files. And she understood the oil company. Watch the X-Files, but watch the standalones. The Russian Oil Products Co. was retailing benzene, kerosene, and other products in Great Britain, and at 1 to 3 pennies below the market price. Far more disturbing than this threat to the price structure, just think about Tesla Energies. The Tesla, the Tesla before Tesla. Far more disturbing than this threat to the price structure of the oil market from the viewpoint of Rockefeller Standard's oil companies were the activities of Harry F. Sinclair, who was a close friend of President Harding, whose campaign he and his associates had played a part. He numbered among his business associates many top political figures, including Will H. Hayes and his attorney, and Morgan Allied National Republican Committee chairman, as well as Archibald B. Roosevelt. I did not know that Archibald and Theodore Roosevelt Jr. The latter was a director of Sinclair Refinery Co. at Theodore Jr.'s request. In 1919, Archibald had been made vice president of Sinclair & Co. In the following year, Theodore Jr. resigned his post to become Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the Harding administration. So the Rockefellers tried to gain control at the Teapot Dome structure, adjoining the fabulous Salt Creek oil fields in Wyoming, that had been made a naval oil reserve. Let's see when is Pearl Harbor in here. Navy, naval. Okay. Then there was something in Canada. It's the Arctic, Inuit. And there was somebody as a secret dummy corporation to purchase more than 30 million barrels of oil from the Mexia field at $1.50 and resell it to organizers' companies at a profit of 24 cents a barrel. total profit of more than $8 million. We used to bribe the public officials involved in the Teapot Dome case. Yeah, now that's the thing. So many people are bribed with oil, says the aromatherapist. And what would they do with the solar energy? It's like you get a sun, you get a sun, you get a sun, then people in the house starting to melt. The complicity of Rockefeller's Standard Oil in the Teapot Dome scandal is further revealed by the conversation between Harry Sinclair, James O'Neill, and the two other persons at the Bankers Club of New York, 1922, milliseconds before the Great Depression. The Rockefeller interests cunningly avoided. Okay, suppose there was some future trouble to come up afterwards, who would take care of that? Meaning the Great Depression. The Sinclair Oil Co. is big enough to take care of that, answered Sinclair. If the Sinclair Oil Co. is not big enough to take care of that, Standard Oil is big enough to take care of that, O'Neill said. And they did. And there were philanthropic odor of sanctimony in order to impress the peasants. Yeah, this is where Rockefeller was scrutinized, testified before the Senate committee that investigated the Teapot Dome, and started spreading charity around, which means delivering stuff to his other companies in the name of charity. Probably he invented that. Gut feeling. Subsequently, when it was brought to the light that Stewart had withheld from his company the profits of the Continental trading deal, John D. Jr. professed indignation of the benefit of the gullible peasantry, retired coal. Here is just a little bit of nepotism. And kind of like they managed to smooth that out, and here we get the duchies again. Middle and Far Eastern concessions from far Soviet Russia and Iran that the oil titan Standard Oil and Royal Dutch had sought in vain. I think that the Rockefeller versus House of Orange is still um, with Montauk. um, had sought in vain. In this quest, he had the advantages over them of having no prior claims and of starting with a clean slate. That's not John Locke's tabula rasa. But it may be funded for that. Stanford sent some engineers to seek concession for all the Caucasian oil fields that Rockefeller considered his property, and over which he and the Royal Dutch were battling fiercely. And they still are, and they still are. This is Wildenbergen, Belsen, gebroekt. Okay, the Bilderbergers are supposed to be a conglomerate of American billionaires and European billionaires, learning how, exchanging tips how to try to normalize pedophilia. And enslave the world together. Allegedly. Um, I began with the fact that there was a collective energy reading where certain boundary had been crossed and it backfired. So, so this is a coping mechanism. um, we're still in 23. Let's move up the years. Teapot Dome scandal. USSR. Chinese. The Cultural Revolution and such. That will be later, but okay. Lee learned from Reddick that the latter despaired of succeeding in communist propaganda in the US. Bolshevik propaganda was perfectly futile, training a very large number of people in philosophy and technique of revolution. These were his guides in harnessing the Rockefeller fortune and philanthropies to the service of their allies and facilitating the progress of communism. So that was happening in Asia and China by Lee and Radek. This is the Bolshevik Revolution. We're about that timeline, by the way. The men who do the business of the world now shape the destinies of the world. But those men are women. He points to Russia as the supreme challenge to the. Okay, why do I say that? First of all, because the occultistic practices that they use derive on the creative power of the womb. Unfortunately, they do it in a rapey way, which means that they are enslaving themselves to do what the women came to do. And now the funny thing about the women is that most of them never to begin with wanted to be matriarchs. They wanted to have their sovereignty and have men have their sovereignty. Everybody's He points to Russia as the supreme challenge to the businessman and the failure of diplomacy. He poses the question, is not business as usual the best road back to normalcy and the elimination of the menace of the Bolshevik alliance with Asia? Business was not as usual. The Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial had already begun to finance the Institute of Pacific Relations, a communist espionage agency dedicated to carrying out of Russia's plan to attain world conquest to the control of China, India, and ultimately the balance of Asia. Nothing like the BRICS. The depression which Radek envisaged and as essential if communism was to make any headway among American workers was engineered and already in preparation. The memorial had undertaken under the aegis of Beardsley Rummel to foster the spread of Marxism, communism, and socialism in the US and the world by financing numerous agencies devoted to the red objective And here is how basically the Rockefeller is fighting the Rockefeller. And a lot of people try to imitate that. Among these agencies, the financing of which by Rockefeller got underway only after the deal with the Soviets for their oil are the following. Russian Student Fund, um, the Institute of Pacific Relations, American Council of Learned Societies, and Conference of Social Science International School of Geneva, National Research and Council, Social Sciences Research, and so on. Rockefeller's Soviet deal. Rockefeller's support of communist totalitarianism was the natural outcome of the confluence of the two streams of development of totalitarian thought and activity. And again, when people did not want people thinking, they wanted to simply enslave people, so they wanted a lot of stupid people and even more stupid people that did do the dealing of trading them. But people are not so easily stupid. And the totalitarianism itself created a situation where people were forced to deal with the daily problems that that sparked thought. One was of Bismarck and Germany. Bismarck had fostered Marxism and recrudescence of the primitive remedy of need since the days of primordial man. Now here's the thing, when people don't get that through like being educated about the resource, they see the things in the energy. And primitive remedy of need since the days of primordial man as a device for promoting the vast-scale crime he contemplated. So, vast-scale crime by the Rockefeller and Reverend Gates, through the use of the same device in the guise of religion and sham benevolence and philanthropy. So it's Marxist propaganda. Nelson Rockefeller and oligarchies in the State Department of Rockefeller's Institute of International Education and of his Council on Foreign Relations. Subsidized by the Rockefeller philanthropies, Professor Felix Frankfurter of Harvard made a cause célèbre of the Sacco-Vanzetti case, communist causes. Is that like the commies list? Philanthropy? Is this what I think that it is? In China, Rockefeller interests were doing their utmost to further the objectives of the Axis partner, namely the Cultural Revolution. Is philanthropy. Rockefeller benevolence. The China received flowed into propaganda